Okay, now let's get into the not so easy ones. First one I'm going to talk about is the academic eligibility for the fall of 2020. And you may wonder why the association took this step. I will tell you why. I recommended to the board that we do this simply because whenever I started talking to schools throughout the state, I heard a range of things that were going on and how they were going to treat second semester and fourth quarter grades. I had some schools tell me, well, we're just going to take and give them whatever they had at the end of the third quarter. That's what they're going to have for the semester. I had others tell me, well, it's only for enrichment and they can only do better, but not do worse. Then I had other schools tell me that we are going to hold our kids accountable for everything they do. We're going to give them grades and they have to have that completed in order to pass classes. Whenever I started hearing all the different ways that people were going to evaluate academic eligibility for next semester, I looked at, okay, we have kids that have got a moving target. One school's got one thing, another school's got another thing. And normally that would not bother me because they're all in the same boat as far as they're all in your buildings and taking classes, and we know what you're doing, and you know that your kids have access to instruction, all those things. Because of the unknown of how everybody is treating it, just felt that it was important for us to look at what we need to do for our kids and try not to put more stress on them than they already are under. We have kids who don't have access. We have kids whose parents have lost jobs. We have kids who are taking care of their younger siblings, all kinds of things that are prohibiting from being able to focus on the task at hand of doing their classwork and their homework to ensure they pass the classes. So because of that, I asked the board to grant relief of the academic standard for all students going into the fall of 2020. This is a one semester thing. It's not something that I do lightly, simply because to me, the academic standard is one of the most important rules that we have whenever you start looking at earning the privilege to represent your school. But just trying to do what's best for our kids throughout the state. No, not everybody's going to agree with me on that, and that's perfectly fine. The reality of it is that so often I hear from people, well, you don't care about kids and all you care about is rules. Well, guess what? We do care about kids, and we want to make sure that they get the opportunity to participate whenever they've had to sit at home now for, it's going to be 2.5 months without contact with their teachers, their coaches, their administrators. And we just felt like, or I felt like, it was the right thing to do, and the board agreed with me and granted that relief. So that's the academic standard going into next school year for the fall only. And, you know, my hope is that we're back in the fall, back to a normal setting, but that remains to be seen. The second part of the e-blast that we sent out, please understand that we are trying to give direction for the summer only. There are to be no interscholastic activities or sports occurring during this school year. Ultimately, everyone is shut down to having kids on your campus till the last scheduled date of your school year. For some, I've heard as early as April 30th, and others I've heard as late as June. So it's going to depend on what you had scheduled originally in your calendar for when you're going to complete your school year. As long as you are still within your school year, the summer has not begun. The Friday of Memorial Weekend begins our summer. And at that point in time, provided that your local, state, and national government has said it's okay to have contact, then we're looking at your summer. And so all these guidelines that we put out last week simply may be moot. If you cannot have contact all summer long with your kids and can't start back till August, doesn't matter what we said as far as on what can happen over the summer, simply because it is reliant upon what the local, state, and national government say as far as on safety and interaction with your kids. So that's the kind of the lead in to what we had to do. And what we did is that we looked at what happens during the summer, and the restrictions are in sports. I've heard people say, well, you didn't do anything for activities. the only restriction that activities have during the summer is the dead week, is a dead period. And that what the board did is they took action last week to grant relief of the dead period to allow it to be optional for your schools. If you cannot have contact with your kids till July 1, then you pretty much have had an entire month of the summer as a dead period. If you can go back June 1, then you may decide that you want to keep your dead week or your dead period during the summer. But we want to leave it up to you all as local schools to make that determination of what's best for your kids and getting them back involved with your coaches on your campuses and working with them to try to make sure that they're okay. And so that was, that's part of the reason for the dead period, wanting to make sure that you have the options to do whatever you need to during the summer. That also goes into the contact days. Back in 2009, the schools said that they wanted more flexibility and freedom to work with the kids during the summer. And because of that, the contact days come into being during that year on the annual ballot in 2009. And right now it says you have 20 days that you can do whatever you want with your kids during the summer. I asked the board to make that optional as well, simply because, again, your coaches and your kids have not had contact. If we go to June, for most of you, it's going to be for 2.5 months. If it's July, it's 3.5 months. Again, I'm trying to give some ability for those kids to be with people and around people that they've not been able to be around. And so that's why I ask them on the contact days. In that situation with the contact days and what that allows, it has allowed since 2009 for schools to set up interscholastic competition with other schools during the summer, and they can represent their school. A lot of you have got summer leagues that your teams play in. There's a summer league basketball team. There's our summer league softball. Those things can occur. Now, football has restrictions to not allow this, simply because with the lack of the catastrophic insurance and the fact that those guidelines, the administrator said they didn't want football games being played during the summer. It does not allow for football, but it allows for everything else. And with that, what the wording in the bylaw stipulates in 315 says that enrolled students only can represent your school in these competitions during the summer. Well, a graduate from your school in 2020 is no longer enrolled. Therefore, we wanted to make sure to give them access this summer to allow that to occur if you so choose as a school. If you want to take and schedule a couple of baseball games or softball games to allow you to have a home game and do a senior night and recognition, you can do that. If your conference wants to run a track meet, just so that your seniors have one opportunity their last season to perform, you can do that. But again, it's totally your call. Plus, this only occurs if the restrictions for the social distancing are removed or, I guess, decreased to allow you to have that contact. So again, all this was put out to try to help schools, help kids, and to give you some guidance for the summer. I've had people tell me, well, you said we can't have a season. Folks, this is not a season. The spring season is done. The spring championships are done. What we're trying to do is look at ways to give you opportunities to help your kids and do stuff for your kids over the summer, if at all possible. So all this is. I've had questions about, are we going to allow the 2020 graduates to come back next spring and participate in the season next spring? The answer to that is no, we are not. People will say, well, what about the NCAA? They're letting their kids come back, and how come we can't? Well, the reality of it is this. For those students who are going to be representing those universities next spring, who are getting the extra year of eligibility under the NCAA, they are going to be enrolled students at that university, and they're going to be participating in classes at that university, either still taking undergraduate classes or taking graduate classes. The other thing is the NCAA says you have 5 years to use your 4 years of eligibility. We have an 8-semester rule. We also have a postgraduate rule. in both those situations, it says that you have, once you begin ninth grade, you have 8 consecutive semesters. And also it says that once you graduate from a high school, you cannot go back and participate. Because of things and the fact of those students just want to show up and participate as graduates, that you have nothing to hold over them to make sure they do what they're supposed to do. At this time, my stance is that we hate that for those kids, but their high school careers are over as far as representing your school in the regular season and postseason next year in 2021. You know, it may seem harsh, but the reality of it is that for many of you, you got kids that may be past the age rule that they're going to be graduating next year. They wouldn't be too old. Then how do we determine that? Do we waive the age rule? You're going to have kids who are going to be off college. Are you going to allow them to come back in and do those things? And so what our stance is of right now is that those kids will not participate that are graduating in 2020 any further in high school regular season or postseason in 2021. Okay. Somebody asked about the fall start date. I hope and I pray that we can start on August the 10th next year. Even doing that, it may look different than what we've looked in the past. Trying to figure out how do you practice if you have social distancing that is required. It's a little hard to line up on a line in football or to play volleyball where everybody has to stay 6 feet away from one another. And so we'll have to look and see kind of what the rules are at that point in time and make those decisions as that gets closer. But right now our plan is to start on August 10th. Somebody asked if we were looking at moving up that start date. No, we are not. The thing is that the legislators have said that they want the start date for school to be on August the 24th next year at the earliest. We're 2 weeks prior to that under our rules. And basically we're just going to leave it there and see what we do, where we go from that. As I talked about the dead period during the summer and being optional, the fall no contact period for your fall sports, which is from August the 3rd through August the 9th, there can be no sport-specific instruction in any fall sports during that window. That has not changed, and we're not looking at adjusting that. That will be in place. So your fall coaches, they can do conditioning, but they cannot do sport-specific instruction during that time. If we get back to where the first access to kids is August 1, I don't think that we'll remove that because I'm afraid that we'll have coaches that'll start practicing August 1 and just keep on going all the way through for the fall. And that's not what we want. So we'll just have to look at that as that gets closer to see what's happening. Somebody asked about what about during the summer with the multi-sport athletes? Can they play in multiple events or different sports during the same day? Yes. The reality of it is that all your coaches are going to want to have your kids, access to your kids, and want to have them involved as much as possible. We cannot make up for lost time. So make sure your coaches understand that they are not to take and just run these kids ragged. The other thing is that summertime is optional. And if a family or a kid says, I've got to go because we're going on a vacation, we're going to go see our family in another state that we haven't seen for 3 months, coaches need to understand that. They need to take and not say anything but have a good trip, and we look forward to seeing you when you get back. You need to make clear to your coaches that we all have to work together and be receptive to what's going on for everyone. You know, we all know what we have been experiencing, what we've been dealing with. I will tell you, for me, it's been a month since I've seen my family. You know, it's just one of those things that I'm not going to go back and be around my parents who are in their 80s if I have possibly can give them this disease. My approach, others have different approaches. But the reality of it is that we all have people that we miss and we haven't seen. And whenever this opens up, you know, we'll see what happens as far as with the virus. But I will tell you, people are going to want to see other people. Just think about yourselves and what you want to do. And part of that needs to be the fact that our kids could come back and see their friends and be part of their team, because that's one of the things that we teach with what we do is be good to your teammates, be there for your teammates, be supportive. And those coaches do that for their kids. And so we just need to make sure that we understand that and remember that. Okay. A lot of information in a real short period of time. Questions, anything that you guys are dealing with, you know, concerns, things that you want. Kerwin, you're an idiot for doing these things. You know, I've heard a little bit of everything. And so it is what it is. I see Corey's on the screen with me, and Corey will have heard this statement before. A good friend of mine who's superintendent of Mound City's Ken Eaton tells me, get on the side of right and let them chip away at you. I think what we've done for our kids with the academic standard and what we're trying to do during the summer to give some access, I think that's on the side of right. Not everybody's going to agree with that. But the thing is that we're just trying to do what we can on the fly, because as soon as we make a decision, 10 minutes later, I find out something else and I've got to make a different decision. And what all that does is that makes you look like you're an idiot and you don't know what you're doing and stuff. But the reality of it is we cannot be set in our ways, and we have to be flexible, and we have to deal with the information we have and make the best decision we can at the time with the information we have. So you guys have been dealing with this. You all are dealing with it right now with your teachers and trying to figure out how do you educate your kids and how do you feed your kids and how do you make sure your kids are getting what they need. And there's no easy answers. And it's always easy to play armchair quarterback and second guess. Hindsight's always 20/20, as all the sayings go. And so we just continue to look at, evaluate, and trying to figure out what we can do. We hated to see us have to change the postseason or eliminate those things. So, all right, let me look at some of the questions. Has there been a discussion with the legislature about allowing schools to start school earlier than August 24th? I have not heard anything on that as far as them looking at that. The only thing I've heard about the legislators is that they're starting back next week, Monday, on the 27th. Our lobbyists have been trying to find out what they're going to do as far as what order they're going to go on bills and what's going to be the focus. Right now, House Bill 2273 that allows homeschool students to show up at your school and just participate is number one on the formal calendar to be discussed. We'll see what happens. If that does occur, I'll let you know. I have to believe that the first thing the House is going to do when they get back on Monday is start in on the budget. Their plan is to try to get that completed by May the 8th. They have to complete their part of it to get it over to the Senate. Then the Senate does their part, and then they'll have to confer back and forth to see if they can come up with a final budget. Many of you heard that the governor withheld money that was in the supplemental budget that was supposed to come to schools and some other categoricals. But right now, what you've been receiving for the year 2019, 2020 should be consistent for the public schools, and what's happening there. Has there been any talk about refunds for spring sports for MSHSAA if we do not participate in sports over the summer? I will tell you, I'm sorry, that was privately, but in that situation, I will tell you that we will not give refunds. We have talked about doing credits, but we're going to wait till we see what falls out for the schools financially, as well as for the association. With us not having with limited attendance for Class 1, 2, 3 basketball, limited attendance for the quarterfinal Class 4, 5 basketball, and no Class 4, 5 Final Four, and all the spring sports, it's a hit of over $500,000 to the revenue for the association. We do not have a tax levy. Our revenue that we use to function comes from the registrations that you sign up for sports, as well as the gate receipts that we get from our events. And I will tell you, If we cannot have fall events, if we cannot do the fall championships, or we have to do it with limited enrollment, we're going to be hurting at the association. And it's not so much that that I look at we're going to have to close the doors right away, but we're going to have to let a lot of people go. And right now, I'm looking at schools and saying, okay, whenever you're reducing half your staff, then we'll start looking at it as well. So it's just, it's just a really challenging situation. I've always told this group, and I've told other groups, the hardest job in the school business is a high school principal. Never was a middle school principal, so I can't tell you about that one. But the high school principal to me was the hardest job, simply because you're always in the fire and you're always making decisions. I will tell you, as a superintendent, the only time that my job got on that equal and maybe surpassed that was the days whenever there was no money to go around and you're worried about being able to save people's jobs and able to provide a livelihood to your employees. That's whenever the superintendent's job got more difficult than the principal's job. We're getting ready to get there. And for us in the office, we're there. And so we're looking at all those different things.
Kerwin,
yeah.
The next question is, if a student, just to clarify, if students don't earn the usual credits required, they are waived for the fall, a one-time deal.
That is correct. The academic standard is going to be waived for students who did not receive enough credits for this semester for the spring of 2020, that they would be eligible for the fall of 2020, and for a one semester only. That being said, if schools feel like kids didn't do anything during the third quarter and have not earned the privilege to participate, you can always be more restrictive and say, you didn't do what you were supposed to do during the third quarter. We understand what happened during the fourth quarter, but you didn't do what you were supposed to do during the third quarter, so we're not going to allow you to participate. If you want to put on grade checks every 2 weeks, or if you already do that and you want to tell them, you know what, we're going to hold your feet to the fire this fall semester and make sure that you're passing everything during the semester. Schools can do that as well. Some schools already do that. And so we're just trying to allow consistency across the board, since schools are all over the place on what they're going to do on giving credit for this fall or the spring semester.
Okay, and then it says MSHSAA is forgiving grade requirements, but if we have a good standing policy at the local level that includes grades, can we still enforce that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right.
Your kids know what you expect. And that's part of the problem with what we're dealing with statewide, is the fact that we've got kids that left school on a Friday expecting to be back on Monday, and we're not prepared. We're not told what the expectations were going forward. And to be honest, schools were trying to figure out how to do all of it. And we understand that. And, again, we're just trying to give as much flexibility to the kids as possible. So,
do the adjustments to rule apply to just spring sports, or do all sports this year? Example, can basketball seniors play this summer?
In that situation, if you want to allow those kids who graduated in 2020 to play during the summer on your basketball team, that's fine. We talked about doing it just for spring sports, but my question is why do those basketball players need to play? But we want to leave that up to the local school. If you feel like you want them to come out there and play with you one more time, that's totally your call for this summer. But we were primarily looking at the spring sports when we looked at this.
I have no more questions from the chat. Are there any questions that you have out there that you want to just ask Kerwin?
Well, hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this clarified some things. If you still have questions, shoot me an email. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. Even though I wish I was sitting at Sylvan Lake where my picture is behind me. I'm actually at my house today, working on my house, but I'll go back and forth between the house and the office. No one is at the office. And so everything that we get, it's probably best just to shoot me an email. My email address is kerwin@MSHSAA.org. You can see how I spell Kerwin. It's KERWIN at MSHSAA.org. Just shoot me an email and I'll be glad to answer your questions. Okay.
Thank you, Kerwin. We appreciate your time. I know this is a very difficult time for you. It's normally a pretty difficult job to begin with. And when we throw all of this into the mix, it makes your job that much more difficult, as well as your associates. We appreciate you, and we want you to know that we're all in this together. For the rest of you, I'm recording this, and I will have this posted on our website probably either later this afternoon or first thing tomorrow. And if there's nothing else, I'm going to end this session.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate the opportunity.